Hello everyone, I am Justin Patrick Bibisa and we are going to discuss the textual presentation under the Unit 4 Analysis and Interpretation of Assessment Result. So I'd prepare a icebreaker, but since we are not able to meet face to face, we're going to proceed with our lesson objective. At the end of the lesson, the student should be able to define and explain the different stages of a statistical inquiry, differentiate the types of levels of measurement, construct a clear and effective textual presentation. So now, let us proceed to our introduction. After an assessment activity, a teacher needs to organize his or her data in a way that can help him or her better visualize the overall performance of the class, especially when important decisions are to be made to improve the teaching learning process and for better student achievement. Other school leaders or administrators also use these techniques in research, accreditation, and administrative decision making situations. One of the most common ways to do this is to use a graphical presentation. So the graphs, charts, and even textual presentation helps teachers to find patterns in student assessment results. It also makes it easier to see where students are doing well and or where they need help. So teachers would be able to adjust their lessons and make better choices to support learning. So now what is a presentation? So a presentation conveys information from a speaker to an audience. Presentations are typically demonstrations, introduction, lecture, or speech meant to inform, persuade, inspire, motivate, build goodwill, or present a new idea or product. So when we say presentation means sharing information, ideas, or finding with an audience in a clear and structured way. It can take many forms such as giving a speech, using slides like PowerPoint presentation, showing charts or graphs, or even storytelling. The purpose of it is to communicate your message effectively so that others can understand and engage with it. So now, let us discuss the four stages of a statistical inquiry. So we have collection, presentation, analysis, and interpretation. Then let us discuss the collection. So collection is the process in gathering data. So in collection, this is all about gathering data or information. For example, if you are studying people's favorite ice cream flavors, you would collect their answers through surveys, interviews, or observation. So now is the presentation. So presentation, it is the organizing of collected data. So think of this as how you show or share information with others. It could be through charts, graphs, slides, or even storytelling. The goal is to make your message clear and engaging for your audience. So next is the analysis. So this is the process of extracting from the given data relevant and noteworthy information. So after collecting data, you dive into it to find patterns, trends, or insights. This is like piecing together a puzzle to understand what the data is telling you. So next is the interpretation. So interpretation, making conclusion from the analyzed data. So here in interpretation, you take what you've analyzed and explain what it means. For instance, if most people prefer chocolate ice cream, you interpret that chocolate is likely the most popular flavor in your group. So that's that is the four stages of a statistical inquiry, which is the collection, presentation, analysis, and interpretation. So now let us proceed to the two divisions in statistics. So in two division in statistics, we have the descriptive and inferential. So let us first discuss the descriptive. So descriptive, it is a statistical process for defining the features and properties of a group of people, location, or things using data that can be verified. Now, when we say descriptive, this focuses on summarizing what the data says, like averages, percentage, or visualization. Example, bar chart. The bar chart shows showing favorite ice cream flavor. So it's all about describing what is. So next is the inferential. So inferential is a statistical approach for acquiring information from a sample and drawing inferences from the population using descriptive statistic techniques. So in analysis takes things a step further. It uses the data you have to make educated guesses or predictions about a larger group. For example, based on your survey, you might infer that chocolate. Now let us proceed to the two classification of variables, which are the qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative contains categorical or qualitative response, while quantitative it is a numerical responses that represent amount or quantity. Discrete values obtained by counting, continuous values obtained by measurement. Qualitative data is all about qualities or characteristics. It doesn't deal with numbers but rather focuses on descriptions, opinions, or ideas. This type of data is useful for understanding the why or how behind something rather than just measuring it. Think of it as data you can't measure with numbers but can describe with words. So like let's say for example, if you are researching why people prefer a certain brand of coffee, you might collect answers like it tastes better or it reminds me of home. This answer tell you more about people's feeling and motivations rather than giving you numerical data. So in quantitative data is all about numbers. It involves anything you can count, measure, or calculate. This data helps you identify patterns and trends in a way that can be mathematically analyzed. Think of it as data you can measure or count. Example, if you are studying how much coffee people drink daily, you'd collect numbers like 2 cups, 3 cups, or etc. So, if you are going to study of how much people drink coffee in a daily lifestyle, so you would want to know if how many times they are drinking coffee in just one day. So, quantitative data can be analyzed to find averages, totals, or comparison. So now let us proceed to the two variables, which are the independent and dependent variable. So when we say dependent variable, it is the variable which is affected by another variable. One example of dependent variable is test score. Next is the independent variable. So this is a variable which affects the other variable. One example is the number of hours spent for studying. So the dependent variable is the outcome or effect that you are trying to measure in an experiment. It's what you observe and record, and it changes in response to the independent variable. Think of it as what you are studying or measuring in the experiment. Example, if you are testing how sunlight affects plant growth, the dependent variable is the plant's growth, measured by its height, number of leaves, and etc. So you're asking what happens to the plant's growth when I change the amount of sunlight. The researcher control or change in an experiment. It's the factor you think will affect the dependent variable. So think of it as what you are testing or changing. Example, in the sunlight experiment, the independent variable is the amount of the sunlight the plant receives. You might give one group of plant full of sunlight, another partial sunlight, and another no sunlight to see how this affects their growth. So that's the dependent and independent variable. So now, let us proceed to the four levels of measurement, which are the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So now let us discuss the nominal scale. So a nominal scale categorizes data into distinct non-order labeled purely for identification. It has no numeric or rank value. So like for example, gender, male, female, non-binary. Next is blood type, AB or O. Next is the marital status, single, married, divorced, or widowed. So the nominal scale is the simplest level of measurement. It organizes data into categories, but these categories don't have any kind of order or ranking. Think of it as categories that are different but equal. Example, if you are asking people about their favorite fruit, their answer might be apple, banana, orange, or etc. These are just labels. There's no ranking to say one fruit is better than the other. Scale. The ordinal scale is the set of categories that are ordered from least to most. Don't know numerical distance from each category to the next. Example, education level, high school, bachelor's, master's, doctorate. Pain intensity, mild, moderate, severe, very severe. Rank in competition, first place, second place, and third place. So, the ordinal scale organizes data into categories that have a meaningful order or ranking, but the gaps between the categories aren't consistent or measurable. Think of it as rankings or level where the order matters but the differences between them are not equal. Example, if you are asking people to rate their satisfaction with the service, the responses might be very unsatisfied, unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied, and very satisfied. So there's a clear order from least satisfied to most satisfied, but you can't measure how much more satisfied someone is between neutral and satisfied. So now let us proceed to the interval scale. So this is the scale with values and there is the same numerical distance between each value. This scale has an arbitrary 0 point, which means no true meaningful 0 point. So example, how appealing is this cereal box to children? So current temperature and IQ. So the interval scale measures data where the difference between values is meaningful and consistent, but there's no true 0 point. Without a true zero, you can't make statements like twice as much or half as much. Think of it as numbers with equal gaps but no absolute zero. One good example of interval scale is the temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit, or Fahrenheit in is an interval scale. The difference between 20 degrees Celsius and 30 degrees Celsius is the same as between 30 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius. But 0 degrees Celsius doesn't mean no temperature. You can compare the difference, but you can say that 40 degrees Celsius is twice as hot as 20 degrees Celsius. So next, let us discuss the ratio scale. So this is the scale with scores where there is the same numerical distance between each score. The scale has a true meaningful 0 point that anchors the scale. Example, weight, distance, amount of money in your checking account, and number of questions correct on a quiz. So the ratio scale is the most advanced level of measurement. It has equal gaps between values and it also has a true 0 point, meaning zero represents the complete absence of what you are measuring. Think of it as numbers with equal gaps and true zero. So one good example of the ratio scale is weight is a ratio scale. If something weighs 0 pounds, it truly has no weight. You can also say that something weighing 20 pounds is twice as heavy as something weighing 10 pounds. So height, distance, and time are also other examples of ratio scale. So now let us proceed to the textual presentation. So here in textual presentation, the data are presented in paragraph form. Next, it is usually used when there are only few data to be presented. And lastly, this is the data that can be understood with the help of a simple text, and no table or pie diagram is required for the same. So when we say textual presentation, it is a way of presenting data or information in written form. Usually a sentence or paragraph, this format is commonly used when there is only a small amount of data to share, making it easier to explain and understand in words rather than with tables, graphs, or charts. Why does textual presentation presented in paragraph form? So textual presentation uses paragraphs because they allow you to explain data in context instead of showing raw numbers of or facts. Paragraphs let you provide additional details, background information, or analysis. And why does it is usually for small amounts of data? So when there's only a small amount of data, using paragraphs is simpler and more practical than creating a graph or table. So here are some examples of textual presentation. In a class of 40 students, 5 obtained a perfect score of 50 in their third quarter long test in statistics. 18 students got a score of at least 40, while only 2 students scored 14 and below. Generally, the students performed well in the test, with 30 or 75% obtained a passing score of at least 38. So here we can clearly understand it is because textual presentation is more simpler than other method. We can better understand it even it is a paragraph only. So here are the factors to consider in textual presentation. The author should use wordings that does not introduce bias in research. Accuracy should be maintained in presenting data, and the numbers and percentages presented in the textual data should be reviewed to avoid any mistakes in the presentation. To make it easier for the audience to comprehend the important points in data, the researcher should avoid unnecessary details. Last, another point to consider is to avoid decorative language while make sure that you use scholarly language in your data presentation. Here in factors, the data that we will present to our textual presentation, it should be accurate because just one mistake will affect the whole data. And next, we should only use scholarly language, and we should avoid decorative language to make sure that every single person that is reading our textual presentation will be able to understand it. So here are the advantages and disadvantages of textual presentation. So textual presentation of data allows us to interpret the data more elaborately during the presentation. Small set of data can be easily presented through textual presentation. For example, simple data like there are 30 students in the class, 20 of whom are girls while 10 are boys is easier to understand through textual presentation. No table or graph is required to present this data as it can be comprehended through text. Next, here are the disadvantages of textual presentation. So textual presentation of data is not suitable for large sets of data that has too many details. Graphical or tabular forms allow the researcher to make large data displayed easily. Data take longer to read when presented as text, and when the main text includes a long list of information, readers and reviewers may have difficulties in understanding the information. So textual presentation has advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages of textual presentation is it allows for a detailed interpretation of small data sets without requiring graphs or tables. It is suitable for simple and straightforward data, making it easy to understand, while the disadvantage of it is it is not suitable for large and complex data as it can be difficult to process. Reading lengthy text to find information can also be time consuming and challenging for readers. So, in conclusion, a textual presentation effectively communicates key ideas by organizing information clearly and concisely. It helps the audience understand the main points and draws attention to the most important details. By summarizing and highlighting key takeaways, a well-crafted textual presentation leaves a lasting impression and reinforces the message. So, to sum it up, textual presentation is ideal when the data is straightforward and the focus is on understanding the meaning or interpretation rather than comparing large amounts of information visually. So that's all. Thank you for listening.